Hello, and thank you all for joining us in the Trailblazer webinar, Freedom Day, What Next? Now, we have a lot packed into today's webinar, so I am going to crack on with the introductions straight away. So my name's Eloise Hanson. I am the editor at Boutique Hotel News. Running alongside BHN is two other websites. We have Service Department News and Short-Term Rentals, all of which are published by International Hospitality Media. A few housekeeping rules before we begin. We're going to spend around 45 minutes chatting with our Trailblazers today, with some time at the end for any questions. So if anyone in our audience does have any questions, please submit these using the Q&A function. And this webinar is being recorded, and everyone that has registered will receive a copy within a couple of days' time. So today's session has been kindly sponsored by Cvent, which is a hospitality events tech supplier, and the team has supplied a short video which we're going to play for you.
Hi everyone, I hope you're well. My name is Carla Piers and I'm the Senior Marketing Manager for Cvent, and I'm sure you're looking forward to join the webinar Freedom Day, What's Next from Boutique Hotelier News. But I wanted to share some educational content that we recently have launched at Cvent that is completely free, and I thought it would be relevant for you. I know that this year we all heard a lot of hype around hybrid events, but a lot of people are still wondering how to host them, what are they, etc. And this is why we recently have launched a free webinar, which is actually on demand, so you can watch it whenever you want. The links will be sent by Boutique Hotelier News, so you will have them. But as I said, it's free to attend. And part of the agenda, we will be covering what is a hybrid event, what event professionals or event organizers are expecting for venues, how to promote them, how to sell them, and how to use them in creative ways to leverage your whole event strategy. And this is part of an ebook that is also free that we recently launched called Hybrid Events for Hotels and Venues. I really hope that you can download it. The link is there, cvent.co.uk/hybrid events. And yeah, I don't want to take your time from the wonderful webinar. So thank you so much. And over to you, Louise.
Awesome, thanks Carla. And so the link to Cvent's webinar and the ebook has been popped into the chat. So let's hear from our Trailblazers, and I am going to invite each to introduce themselves, and I'm going to move from left to right as per the PowerPoint slide, which means I'm going to begin with Adrian. Can I hand over to you, please?
Thank you, Eloise. Yes, my name's Adrian Ellis. I'm the General Manager at the Lowry Hotel in Manchester. And I'm also chair of the Manchester Hotel Association, about 70 hotels in Manchester. So I've been chairing that for the last 6 years. Very much looking forward to today's webinar, to discussing how things have been in this part of the world, in Manchester. It's a booming city, lots going on in Manchester at the moment, lots of growth, lots of new hotels and development here. So exciting times, but equally challenging, as I'm sure we'll go on to explore. So thank you for including me today.
Thanks, Adrian. And Jonathan, I'm coming to you next, please.
Thanks, Eloise, and hello to everybody listening to this afternoon's Trailblazers. I'm responsible for 20 properties worldwide. So we have properties in Southern Africa, in Florida, in Guernsey, Channel Islands, Ireland, here in the UK. And it's been very interesting the last 18 months or so to see how governments have reacted and how properties have been closed in some countries, open in others. But clearly here in the UK, all of the properties, the 8 that I'm responsible for, are open. Certainly challenging, and as we were saying off air just now, I don't think we've had any of our team be more agile, more adaptable ever in terms of needing to get jobs done. We don't have the occupancies we'd like, certainly in the cities, and outside of the cities we're very busy. But lots and lots of challenges right now, and we're all up for them, and look forward to discussing on this call what we're doing, some best practices, and how we're going to get through this and ensure that hospitality is a profession that we can attract talent to, and one we can see through this pandemic that hopefully is coming towards an end sometime soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan. And Joanne, coming to you next, please.
Sure. Hi. Thank you very much for having me join the panel today. My name is Joanne Taylor-Stagg, and I'm the General Manager at the Athenaeum Hotel and Residences. Yeah, based in central London, Mayfair. And as Jonathan said, you know, it's definitely a tale of cities and the countryside. So interesting to be able to talk about the difference between the two. We're one of the very few properties that stayed open the whole way through the pandemic because we have residences and looked after our long-term guests. So that has had some great challenges and some great rewarding moments in and of itself. With Jonathan, I'm doing a 250-kilometre cycle for Hospitality Action, just to try and boost the coffers of, honestly, the charity that has really helped so many of our people during this really tough time. So thank you very much for having me.
Brilliant. Thanks, Joanne. And Peter, coming to you next, please.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Peter Avis. I'm the General Manager of Galvin at Windows and 10 Degree Sky Bar on Park Lane, also in Mayfair. And I am also a member of the Supervisory Board of the Institute of Hospitality. And I'm very enthusiastic to be on this panel today to discuss what's going on post-Freedom Day. So thanks for having me.
Thanks, Peter. And last but not least, Giles.
Hi, yeah, my name's Giles Fuchs. I feel as though I'm a slight imposter on this eminent panel in that my main business is serviced offices in London, which are obviously akin to hotels. And we do have bedrooms in some of our serviced offices. But I was approached by a chap I barely knew who showed me a picture of Burgh Island. And I said, that is absolutely amazing. You can buy a hotel on an island in Devon. He said, well, no, you can't. I'm buying it. Anyway, I think he was reeling me in because a week later, he phoned me and said, all my funding's fall out of bed. Do you want to buy it? And I have to own up and said I'd never heard of Burgh Island before, but I immediately said yes. So it was a decision of love. It subsequently went down there and it was just as amazing as I anticipated. I also own a drink called Gunner, those expats of you out there, and golfers, tennis players, etc. A drunk a Gunner, some of you, and no one had ever put it in a tin, so we put that in a tin. And I own a few other businesses, including a cleaning company, because you can never get your hotel or your serviced offices clean enough. So yeah, I not only bought Burgh Island in 2018, I've been learning hoteliering, if that's the right word, but I've also been finding my way through a very complicated COVID session.
Well, and on that note, talk about complications, talk about the year that we have had, and thanks, Giles. Sorry, I thanked everyone apart from yourself, so thank you. But I would like to highlight some stories that I have published, either myself on Boutique Hotel News or other stories from other media that just provides some context to the main discussion. And in the UK today, the quarantine rules have changed for incoming travellers from the US and Europe, meaning that those fully jabbed no longer have to isolate, which I suspect is very good news for hotels, and especially as the UK is set to have a very healthy summer season, according to a survey by the Cumberland Building Society. And within the survey, hotels rank as the preferred accommodation choice amongst UK adults, with 69% stating they would pay more for a property that complies with COVID hygiene and safety measures. What is casting a shadow over this positive news is staff shortages that were being felt before the so-called pingdemic. And on the next slide, we can see how staffing shortages within hotels specifically is making national TV. And we also have an example of how recruitment efforts are being ramped up, and there's an industry-wide push at the moment for greater training, and education and ways to attract new talent is put into context when you look at the next slide. As we can see on this top story, yes, Freedom Day has led to an influx in footfall and has provided lift. However, some businesses are having to shut temporarily because they simply can't meet the demand. And hence what has prompted the topic of today's webinar. So let's crack on with the main discussion. I'd like to begin, please, with a question to Adrian and ask, at the Lowry Hotel, what COVID measures have you decided to keep in place following Freedom Day?
Thank you, Eloise. Yeah, we've kept most of our regulations in, I guess. So we've, like many of the people discussing today, we opened and closed, I guess, over the last 18 months. We had business groups coming through, and we also had sports teams coming through, but that was it. We didn't open for any individual guests for most of that 18 months. So we've been open since May. Very cautiously, so we kept everything in from May, and then of course with Freedom Day, which is the whole topic of discussion today, we debated amongst the team what we should and shouldn't keep on. So to a large part, the only thing we've really relaxed is the social distancing. So the spacing between tables. We've had some of our first events last week. We did an event for 260. We did another wedding for 160 at the weekend. So starting to see a few events inquiries and social distancing, the rules and regulations before, it wasn't possible to do such big numbers. So we started to relax that. But everything else, so the rules that we are keeping in place, everybody's wearing face masks, so all our staff members. We still have hand sanitizers everywhere. We still have thermal screens. We have those up for both our staff and for guests. So we've kept most of those in place, really. So I would say the only real relaxation has been that of social distancing. In terms of behaviour, I think, you know, I was worried about both parts. Firstly, would guests sort of rush in and take all their masks off and be running around the hotel? But that's not the case. Certainly the demographic that we're seeing, I would say 75% probably are wearing masks, all the time. So just a few not wearing, and they seem to be fine intermingling with those who aren't wearing, if you see what I mean. So doesn't cause any disruption. And our staff have really understood that what we went back to all our team members and said is that what we'd like to see is just some protection level, especially with a lot of young staff here. So we said to them that a lot of them haven't had vaccinations yet. So we said to them, for your protection, we think we should keep the masks on. We discussed with them, and by and large, not everybody, but the majority felt that was the right thing to do. And I think it's proven to be the case. So what we're seeing, I'm sure the same for my colleagues here, we see in Manchester several restaurants and hotels that have closed or partially closed because of pingdemic, which ostensibly has been caused by a number of people in one area of the business having to isolate. And we've avoided that so far, and I think the masks, or keeping the masks on, has been a way of doing so. So yeah, as I said, to a large part, the only thing we really released was the social distancing. Everything we kept, and I think the feedback has been good. So, and what we said to everybody, let's review this every so often. So for that, I mean probably every sort of 3 to 4 weeks, to see whether the cases have gone down, whether there's room to relax further. Because as you can see, the government are pretty much leaving it up to us to decide what to do now. So I think those measures have been well received by guests and employees at the moment, and we'll review every few weeks to see whether we're doing the right thing again.
And you mentioned that you've hosted a few events since Freedom Day. I'm wondering, Adrian, whether you've seen bookings improve since restrictions have eased.
I think Jonathan was mentioning about city centres, and absolutely right. I think possibly London's still taking a long time to come back, especially with international business. But Manchester's fared fairly well. I mean, this is all relative, of course, so nothing like we were doing pre-pandemic. But I think the cities were around about 60% occupancy in June, and the same for July, maybe slightly higher in August. So there's been some good results, a very strong leisure demand coming back, which is good. So that was really revolving around weekends, but over the summer it's ended up being midweek as well, has been good. So we've been full on many days, which has been good. And the ancillary business is probably the area that surprised me. So I mentioned the events have just started, but our restaurant's been full Friday, Saturday and Sunday pretty much since May the 17th, and continues to be so. I was worried there'd be a bit of a knee-jerk reaction, everybody going out to celebrate, and then slowly it would slow down as the weeks progress, but that's not been the case. And ditto the spa, which has also seen record levels of business. We're doing better in the spa than before the pandemic, which is a bit strange, but it's true. And I know, having checked with my colleagues in the city, they seem to be sort of similar business. So the obvious is missing, Eloise. We're still not seeing any corporate. We see almost no international business at all because the airport's still very, very quiet. And the meeting business I indicated only just starting to come back. But leisure's been stronger than we first thought. So, you know, so I think all of us has taken a surprise how much the demand has been and continued right through the summer so far.
Well, it certainly sounds very promising, and there clearly is a lot of pent-up demand. I know there was WHO published some research today that looked at statistics between June and July of a family of 4 travelling amongst 12 popular staycation destinations, and 93% of the hotels are already fully booked up. But these are, if you like, classic leisure destinations. It's the Lake District, it's the Isle of Wight, it's Cornwall. And looking at these destinations, Giles, I'd like to come to you next, please, obviously with Burgh Island in Devon. How does your experience perhaps differ from what Adrian has just talked about?
I think in terms of protecting both the staff and the clients, not very much. I think it would have been churlish to get rid of anything to begin with, especially as the government advice kept changing. So we still have sneeze screens, we still have sanitisation stations, we still don't have the full menus, paper menus, which get discarded, etc., etc. So in that respect, no change. We're probably slightly lucky in a lot of what people do at our hotel is outside. That makes it easy. The doors are always open, and as everyone knows, Devon is always sunny. We're a rainy day, so so that's helped us. And of course, being our natural clientele is of an age that's over 35, that is double vaccinated, and there's no foreign travel, and they're pretty well all British, so they're adhering to the rules and are double jabbed. So they are both following the rules, and of course they're fairly pragmatic about it. I think anyone, and I guess I might be going a little bit off script here, but anyone who reads the figures understands that although they might get it, they're fairly safe. So I'm agreeing. I think the social distancing is nice to have, but they can choose to or not, I think is the point.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of occupancy, I guess very different experience. All the clients who had booked in the various lockdowns, we kept in contact with. So you add that to the people, the staycation people, we are full. Mm. And I kid you not when I say we've been 100% full since the 17th of May, and we are until the end of October. And October, luckily, we're only at 85% occupied. So we've got some space, anyone interested. And always in for a pitch. And even in December, which is a quiet month for us normally, I think we're at 75%. And we expect to be 100% for those 2 months. I mean, it's early for bookings for those. So people are staying at home. Of course, what we don't know is what's going to happen next year. I think probably next year will also be busy. There are still a lot of concerned people out there, and a lot of those aren't going to travel, and we're going to be full. I think the nice thing about COVID, there's a phrase perhaps you haven't heard too much, but the nice thing about COVID is that it's allowed people to experience Britain, whereas before they wouldn't have bothered. And that's, I think, played into all our hands, and I think it will help our hotel and hospitality industry going forward.
Are you finding that the guests are reassured by the measures that you have in place?
I'm going to say that's difficult to tell, apart from the fact they booked in the first place. So I did see there, Jonathan put up there that people are asking Red Carnation whether people are double jabbed, which I think is interesting. And I'd be interested to know, Jonathan, what the outcome of that is. All being some young staff, or actually quite a lot of young staff, because we had to go looking to my youngest child's A-level leavers and my eldest child's university students to fill the the bar jobs and the pub, which we have on the island. But of course, they're not double jabbed, and some of them aren't single jab. And some of the guys are saying we refuse to get jabbed, and we don't have the right to make them get jabbed. And I'm of a mind that I shouldn't have the right to make them get jabbed. My personal position. So I think our clients are perfectly happy. And I'm down there this week on holiday with my 84-year-old mother and my 80-year-old in-laws, and I think they feel very safe.
Well, I hope you enjoy your holiday, Giles. And does anyone else on the panel have anything to add about which COVID measures they've retained and how long they expect them to be in place?
I'm happy to share what we're doing at Carnation Hotels, which is pretty similar to what Adrian was talking about. We very much kept the protocols in place. We will review this on a fortnightly, monthly basis as we still see is fit, but we think it is a bit early at the moment to be taking away all of the PPE that we have in the properties. The other question and the thing that I've been doing, particularly talking to US travel advisors looking to now send business to London, is these air purifiers. And I've invested in some of these for the properties in our busier areas now. They're very quiet, they're fairly discreet. Having had someone do a lot of research on this, if anybody is looking to get these, you must have a HEPA filter to them. Some of them don't. The real cheap ones don't, so that's important. So we have put those around the property to get this fresher air. Probably going to be more of an issue when we get into autumn, winter than it is right now, because windows and people are tending to eat outside more, of course. But from a protocol point of view, and just sort of where Giles went, people that are booking our properties right now don't really seem interested in asking anything about what we're doing. I think that's a trust factor. I think you're booking luxury hotels, top end, and you just expect it to be right. So we've had very, very few questions from our stay vacation visitors, but we're getting more questions from international visitors, guests wanting to make bookings for the future.
We've had a question come in about the nature of business travel and how we think business travel will look 6 to 12 months from now, and how can hotels adjust to take advantage? Jonathan, would you like to take that one?
Yeah, sure. So I think all of us on this call very much think and know that the leisure business is going to bounce back quicker than the business. And I think there is going to be a bit of a long haul for that. I think this pandemic has very much brought the digital world to the front, so that we all know these Zoom calls, Teams calls, etc. They do work. So I think where companies perhaps used to come to Manchester or London for their 4 board meetings on an annual basis, let's say, I think they're going to shrink now to just a couple of, and they'll do 2 like this and perhaps 2 face-to-face. I think companies at the moment are showing responsibility, and for the many scared people out there, which one mustn't underestimate now, who don't want to travel, companies are understanding that and saying to people, you don't have to travel if you don't want to. So clearly that's having a negative impact on people that would have come and stayed. And in addition, of course, to our food and drink now, because this stay work from home, which seems to be very prevalent right now, means that you know, where we'd enjoy lunches, dinners, drinks from a lot of these businesses in our areas now, there's a much reduced numbers coming through. So my gut feel is we're going to have to get through this year. I think we're going to have to reassure people this whole double vaccination, that hopefully this COVID does come to some kind of end where we get used to living with it, and then I think business travel will start to come back in 2022. But I think to get back to the 2019 levels, we're probably even pushing into 23. And we're all looking at different ways as to how we can get people to come and stay from a business point of view. We're all looking at different angles as to how we can get that. I know many hotels now are turning their big suites they have in city centres into offices, so that companies perhaps take one of this as an office, and different businesses will then come and use this space. So I think it's also pushed us in to see there is business travel, of course there is, but what do they want? What do they need? And I think we've definitely got to change and wake up to what people are telling us, rather than enjoying what we did up until this pandemic came across.
Thanks, Jonathan. And Peter, I'd like to come to you next,
Hi.
please. As I know we've just touched on, business travel, but I'd like to revisit the COVID measures and how your guests are finding these measures still in place. I know F&B has had even throughout the pandemic, hotels have been able to pivot, for example, to delivery only. F&B has been able to provide that additional revenue stream. So what's been your experience from an F&B perspective?
Yeah, I think just alluding to what John and Giles were saying, I think from our perspective, the guests are looking for an environment, first of all, where they're safe. When we came back after this third lockdown at Galvin at Windows, my first priority was definitely the team experience. I think we've talked a lot about, what are the expectations of the guests and how do we look after the guests? I think at my level, being as general manager of my business, my most important priority was the team experience, because I just sort of felt that if we can get a team experience set up where we come back with a motivated team that's safe, that's motivated and that feels they're in the right environment, then they're going to offer that guest experience over to the guests. So some of the measures we've put in place at Galvin at Windows are following the Hilton protocol on COVID-19. I think it's a very common sense approach. I think we as leaders then need to adapt that at our level. When I say our level, I think, I work in the luxury fine dining experience. So when guests come to Galvin at Windows, they're expecting, I think the grace period's over for us. I think when we first opened, I went to some big restaurants and you could see they were short staffed. You waited a little bit longer for your food. And we were a bit like, okay, COVID's here, you were quite sensitive to it. But I think that patience has run out quite quickly, and rightly with a lot of our guests. I think now the guests want to come into an environment where they feel safe. So what we've done at Galvin at Windows is try to make the guest experience very natural, like we did before. So we haven't put more tables in. We've kept the additional tables out of the restaurant. And I was talking to two guests on Saturday night, and the gentleman's actually a theatre agent, and he said, my God, this is the first night we've been out and I actually feel really safe in here. Now, that's the lift as you climb. That's the word of mouth we as an industry need to create. So yeah, we've kept certain measures in place. We're keeping a natural, safe environment for the guests and for the team, and we're feeling that we've definitely got that happening at Galvin at Windows. But the priority for me is definitely the team experience. In a sense that we've kept the business closed on Monday, Tuesdays. We only open from dinner on Wednesday, and we close on Sunday evenings, because the stretch on the team is just too much. And a lot of colleagues, rightly so, have maybe opened and just driving for revenue and trying to make all that money back because there's a demand. But what we have to be careful is the stretch we're putting on our teams right now. And as colleagues are saying, we have a recruitment crisis, right? We know that it's not a challenge anymore. In my 25 years of work in front of house, we're living through a crisis right now. And I think that's something that is easy thing to say, but it's actually happening. And I do think we need to think out the box of, the pandemic has it, Brexit, hospitality in the UK is low skilled. So I'm working with John Holden, who I think's on the call today, up in Manchester actually. And we've just brought 5 students down to Galvin at Windows from Manchester, Scotland, from the northwest, of course, from the northwest of England. Not being biased, it's where I've got the connections. And we've offered these young people 12 weeks accommodation at the Hilton on Park Lane. They get all their food included. They work in a full mentoring program where I mentor them. They have my restaurant manager, training them on the skills. And at the end of the 12 weeks, we'll either offer them full-time employment or they'll go back to their homes. And then we're going to bring another 10 students down in September and carry that on. And that's having a massive positive effect on the business, because the guests are, we've got more team members in the business. We're training and developing these young people. And more importantly, we're putting a highlight on British hospitality talent. So while we've got low occupancies in our hotels, while you've got them empty bedrooms, I would be urging all colleagues, if you have got some spare rooms, think out the box and think of how you can use them to increase your labour on the restaurant and kitchen floors.
And Peter, whilst we're with you, what are your future projected revenues for the restaurant? As I mentioned earlier, F&B has done pretty well throughout this pandemic?
Yeah. We're hitting all, we've had to reforecast the budgets obviously since we've come back, and even with the limited opening hours and services we're offering, we're still achieving forecasted revenues, definitely for July, which is great after seeing the figures come in actually. And I'm really, really proud to see we're still hitting forecasts. We're not exceeding them. Definitely. Could we be exceeding the revenue? Definitely. You know, we could be doing 120 covers on a Saturday night, which is our maximum. And right now I'm doing no more than 100 covers because, again, the shortage we have in the kitchen, it would be silly to try and push and say, oh, we're exceeding forecast. I'm happy to achieve forecast. Happy not even to hit the forecast right now, if I'm being really honest, as long as we're converting without a loss. And we can lift as we climb and come back in the right managed way. Mm-hmm. But definitely the revenue's there to be had, definitely. There's a big demand for hospitality right now from what I'm seeing.
Thanks, Peter. And Joanne, I'd like to move on to you next, please. We've gone from fine dining and now we're moving to a luxury hotel. How do you expect the London luxury market to fare this year?
I think London, as both Jonathan and Adrian alluded to earlier, is definitely behind the curve, certainly behind the curve versus the countryside and the coast. I dream of a day I can get up to 75% Giles. That's certainly not our normal at the moment. I mean, recently the city ran at 40% occupancy, but I don't think that's indicative of the luxury market in central London. I think those numbers are buoyed by the outskirts and some of the more accessible hotels, I guess. Like everybody else, we're seeing a vast difference between bedroom revenue and F&B and spa revenue. With F&B and all the ancillary revenues doing particularly well, but bedrooms slow. I'm not sure that we're going to see the huge big bounce back that we all hope for. The news last week and the reality today that if you're coming from the US and large parts of Europe, that you don't need to quarantine if you've had all your vaccinations is great. But if I'm perfectly honest, I think we've missed the boat. Europe and particularly Italy opened up their borders to US travelers months ago, and a lot of the agents we speak to have seen an influx of people going to those destinations. So I think it's possibly for the American markets and Europe a little bit too little too late for us. I agree with Jonathan that it's going to take quite some time for that business to come back. So I think it's next summer to get to any sort of good occupancy levels again. And the reality is it's going to take us a few years to get out of this, I think.
Mm-hmm. And Joanne, I'm going to bring in the pingdemic phrase. Has your staff been affected by the so-called pingdemic, and what knock-on effect is this having on hotel operations?
Sure. Unfortunately, we were. Before the word pingdemic even became a word, we had literally on one Saturday, one of our team got a phone call. And then a third of our food and beverage team got a phone call. So we had to do some very quick maneuvering. We did have to close the restaurant whilst we regrouped. Thankfully, we'd spent a lot of time multi-skilling the team, so we were able to redeploy a number of our colleagues to be able to get back up and running. But it's debilitating because the people that are staying are having an inordinate amount of pressure put on them to keep going. And it's frustrating when the people sat at home, and this was before that we knew the app was advisory, not mandatory. You had people at home going for PCR tests, coming back negative and still not able to come back into the business. And so I have to say I'm very much in favor of a more structured, pragmatic approach. It should be far more laser than just a group wide. If you're in any sort of vicinity, you get notified. So yeah, it was tough, but I also know that we're not alone in going through this.
Jonathan, I'd like to come to you next, please. Obviously, you oversee quite a few hotels. Is the pandemic affecting the staff in the hotels that you oversee?
Yeah, for sure. You've been on furlough, many of them, for 15, 16 months, and then you're trying to welcome them back with a bit of business, and they come back, and the next day or two they get pinged. And I don't know, I'm no scientist, and listen, this pandemic is very, very serious, but I for one just don't trust it. I just don't see how it all works, how you're in that vicinity and how you can get pinged. And I think, you know, people are losing a bit of trust with it. We had one of our staff members coming back from vacation and was on an aircraft where somebody had COVID. And you think on an aircraft, it's A, huge, B, people wear masks, C, there's plenty of air conditioning, etc., going around the plane, but everybody on that plane from that ping had to remain at home. And I don't know, I just don't see that as being right. But I think on a business level, it's hideous. And you know, we all wake up now and we really fear how many of our teams are going to be calling us to say they're being pinged. And of course, as hoteliers, we have chefs working with one another, our kitchen teams, our front office. We spend a lot of time with one another in close proximity. So if one gets pinged, the chances of others then being pinged is huge. So I think it's important that we have some kind of tracking device, but I, for one, just don't think this is working. And I think it's pinging far too many people that have been nowhere near anyone with COVID or close to getting it. Their lateral flow tests are negative, their own PCR tests are negative, and yet they're not allowed to come back into the workplace and have to stay home.
Thanks, Jonathan. Let's move the conversation on now to look at recruitment and attracting talent. Obviously, if staff being affected by the pandemic is one issue, but we have a much wider recruitment crisis on our hands here. And Adrian, you mentioned earlier that you head up the Manchester Hoteliers Association. How is the group working to attract and place talent within hospitality?
Yeah, thank you. Well, to put some colour to the whole picture, we're probably around 3,000 vacancies in the city at the moment. That's across bars, restaurants and hotels, so it's quite a sizable number. So and it's uniformly affecting everybody. So I don't know I've not spoken to any operator at the moment who's fine and doesn't have any staffing issues. So we've all got varying scales of the challenge, I guess. So what we're trying to do as an association, we've involved sort of 5 key things. So firstly, with universities, which we've been working at for some time, we've agreed a partnership with Manchester Metropolitan, where all the first years will do compulsory work experience as part of their curriculum. So they do 20 hours out in the operation, and they'll work with hoteliers to support the 20 hours, and then extra hours they will of course be up to the hotel and the student to work through. But that'll be there's about something about 60 students there, which is good. And then simultaneous to that, we're working with Manchester colleges, which is sort of probably about 14 colleges altogether, and there's around 400 students there from different courses. So not just hospitality, there's also business studies, tourism and health and beauty, and they will also go out to various hotels. So we're probably, I think we're looking somewhere between 10 and 12 students per hotel that offer their facilities. Will all go out from September, and again this will add a little bit of help to all the properties to get some support. So those two we're working with. Perhaps more ambitiously, but I think it's got a sort of long-term agenda here, is working with schools. So we're working with 15, 16-year-olds who are looking at catering as an opportunity later down the line. But again, providing some work experience for these. We're planning a sort of 5 hotels working with 5 schools, and this will be across Manchester, doing various things during the course of the year, with the idea that those people will become genuinely interested in hospitality and at a later stage take either a further degree or a course in hospitality, or end up working in the industry. So that's more of a long-term objective, but one we're working on. I've got a few hotels signed up for that too. More short-term, we've we set up something called Progress 21, which happens on the 23rd of September, Manchester Central. It's hospitality industry wide. There's a sort of showcase of various talks in the morning for schools, colleges, universities, anybody else interested in the business. But the afternoon is a huge careers day, so all hotels, restaurants and bars can go without a cost. They set up a table there, and we're inviting hopefully 4,000 to 5,000 people to that event, which has been put through on social media. The Hotel Association put up 5,000, Marketing Manchester, which runs the tourism, put up 5,000 to promote the campaign, £5,000 I'm talking about. And then hopefully we get people to that event late September. And then the other thing that's worth mentioning today, I think, is something called the Talent Hub, which is created between hotels in the city and Marketing Manchester. So it's a website. So if you go to Marketing Manchester and Google Talent Hub, you'll come up with this website, which has got a multitude of different job offers for all hospitality. That's a good source to go to. But we're starting, because they have a lot of people apply. I think they're probably somewhere in the region of 10,000 are going into there from all different sources. And that's part of the problem, I think. As I think Jonathan mentioned at the early part of today, at the end of the day, we need to find supply. We need to find people who are not in hospitality to join hospitality that weren't considering it previously. Otherwise, we're just going around in circles. So this event that I'm talking about with Talent Hub, we're going to start some academies up. So the one that probably came to the hotelier's mind the quickest is a housekeeping one. So housekeeping is very challenging for everybody. Trying to attract people to the industry is challenging. So next week, in fact, we start the discussions on setting up a housekeeping academy in the city. The idea that hotels will fund it, source it, have housekeepers to train on it, but we'll bring people who've never considered housekeeping or hotels as a career before. We'll bring them to this academy and train them up, hopefully for hotels to benefit from at a later date. So they're just some of the things that we've thought out as a group. This is the association to try and stimulate a bit more demand. So some of it from school leavers, some from university, and then this Talent Hub is for people who are not even in the industry but may be able to consider joining us. So that's just some of the things that we're doing.
Mm-hmm. I believe I mentioned this off air to you guys before we went live on this webinar, but one of the earlier webinars in this series was called Where Have All the Staff Gone? And one of the key takeaways from that was that there's a serious lack of education, and that there's been a decrease in hotel schools and hospitality schools, and so therefore there's now perhaps going to be more of a drive to offer these courses, offer that training and offer that education to those interested and those perhaps, as you mentioned, Adrian, outside of the industry, to attract them into it.
Plus, can I just say, Louise, that I can't stress the importance of school. So the school leavers, where probably mums and dads are saying, oh, only go and work in that industry if you want a bit of pin money before you find a real job, inverted commas. I think what we need to get is those school leavers and persuade both the schools, the teachers, and especially the parents about the variety of jobs, the fantastic career opportunities there are here. I think there's just a mountain of opportunity there. It doesn't, maybe won't solve our problem this month or next month, but for the future, we definitely need to do more of that.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Adrian. And whilst we're on the topic of recruitment, I would like to branch into the kitchen. I know that chef roles have been quite notoriously hard to fill. And Peter, what would be your advice for establishing an attractive working environment within a kitchen to attract people in?
I think it's clear to say that the perception of hospitality here in the UK is one of the biggest challenges we have. And I think the whole situation we find ourselves in now and what colleagues are just talking about is it's been a long time coming as far as I'm concerned. We know that the perception of hospitality in the UK and the perception that parents have of hospitality has always been one of a very low, I wouldn't want my child to go there. So I think the pandemic and Brexit is just highlighting this. And I personally think it's a big opportunity to say, look, we've got to accept now that we've got to look inwardly at British talent and start changing that perception. And I think getting into schools and showing case studies like the 5 young people I've got right now at Hilton via John Holden. You know, they're great case studies, and there is a school leaver in there who will be offered a full-time job in a 5-star hotel in London, and her life has changed, you know, and she said it. I speak to her parents on a weekly basis, and Holly's parents are so proud of what she's doing. So I do think that perception piece is something we all have a massive responsibility to be working on. As far as the chef side of it and what we're doing at Galvin at Windows and in the Galvin group as well, is, you know, we offer a great work-life balance. I think the days of expecting chefs to be paid 20k a year and work 60 hours a week and never see the families are gone. As I was saying before this panel started today, you know, I'm working every hour God sends right now, but I still get me Monday off and I still get me glass of wine, you know, and as because we're closed today. So I think we as leaders have to really, we've just changed all our job descriptions for the kitchen. It's about, you know, being in an environment where you can learn, where you're going to have a work-life balance, where you're going to get paid a competitive salary, where you can grow and develop, and where you can open them doors to younger British people as well, and get them in and show them what a great career it is to be in the kitchen. And the days of, you know, the chefs shouting on the pass and bullying chefs in the kitchen, the big elephant in the room right now, them days are gone. And I think Mark Hardiman, my executive chef at Galvin at Windows, is a, you know, he's not young, he's a British lad that's worked his way up, and he's come through very tough kitchens in his career. And I absolutely love working with Mark, because the front of house experience and the kitchen experience at Galvin at Windows is one many young people want to be part of. And when they're going in the kitchen and seeing the culture, they're really appealed by that. So I think my opinion is, make sure you're offering a competitive salary that's relevant to hours. Make sure you're giving them days off. Don't expect them to work double shifts every day. And remember how much of an exciting career it is. And I think as an industry, we're starting again. You know, we've come out of a pandemic, and no matter, there's colleagues on here today who've got many years experience, and I love to learn from Jonathan and the other speakers. But we really have to start again, and we have to think right. And it's not going to happen overnight, but we have to build our industry back up, and we all have to show the working conditions that are healthy and a balance for our team members. And I think that's how we'll turn the corner.
Mm-hmm. Jonathan's just popped into the chat that 4-day week for chefs is being trialled at some of his hotels. So yeah, the times it's changing. And
it is. And sorry, I think the other thing is some operators are offering ridiculous high salaries right now in the industry to try and get staff in, which is not sustainable. You know, we have to be paying the right money, but it's about the value we give to our teams. I think that's what the younger generation are looking for, is, you know, that sit down and just know they're valued in the businesses as well.
Mm-hmm. And Giles, I'd like to come over to you next, please, to talk about building a supportive culture for staff, as I believe you actually have some staff living at the hotel. You actually have staff accommodation. So how are you going about creating that culture for your employees?
Just before I move on to that, I want to echo what's been said about the industry, and I think it was Peter talking about how it's respected or otherwise in Britain. If you look at the continent, the view of the hospitality industry is very, very different. I know that, for instance, Mark Mosman has understood this very quickly, for a long time, and he tells me that he only employs, I'm going to get the college name wrong, but you guys correct me, Lucerne College in Switzerland, very famous hospitality. So he employs from abroad, and he pays them commensurately. And although, of course, you're absolutely right, Peter, we need to keep a balance on payment. A lot of the people in our industry are not well paid. Anyway, so I just wanted to echo all that. And I love the 4-day week thing. We're very challenged at Burgh because we're on an island, so the tide, we're on a cordial island, so the tide comes in and out twice a day. Getting on and off is difficult. You finish at, say, 2 o'clock in the morning, and then you've got to wait for the tide to go out, especially if there's a wind blowing and the waves are high. Because we do have a sea tractor, if any of you have seen that, which is a Heath Robinson type contraption to get us through the waves. On top of that, we're a long way from Plymouth and Dartmouth and Kingsbridge and even Modbury. And then even if they could get those places, property in the South Hands of Devon is very expensive. So we have a particular difficult situation. And yes, we do provide a lot of accommodation. We have 60 staff working on the island, one way or another. and we have a staff house on the island, which was in fact the first hotel on the island back in 1880, but houses about 13 staff. Not very nicely, I would say. Accommodation is not acceptable. And we have bought a cottage opposite, which is beautiful, and is probably the nicest property in Burgh-on-Sea. So they're living the millionaire's lifestyle, but still have the same problem of getting on and off the island. So staffing is very difficult. We are going to apply, perhaps I shouldn't say this, I'll be told off by my architects, definitely, but we're going to apply to have staff accommodation, more staff accommodation built. I think, although not in the same theme as our clients, they should be living in equally nice accommodation, ensuite accommodation, with lounges, with gyms, with kitchens, etc. And I did see, as it Giles Conran and his Melissa doing a hotel in Scotland where they had built beautiful staff accommodation and they were training the staff. And that would solve a lot of our problem, which is finding in the first place. Word of mouth would become the way we found our staff, and also staff retention, which we do struggle with. But on that, in the lockdown, we allowed, and I think again, it's Peter who said this, we allowed all our staff to move into our £500 a night suites with a view to looking after their well-being rather than in their accommodation, some of which was shared with other people. And we kept on the chef to cook for them. We've built them a den, which has a gym in it and a kitchen and a sitting area. It's minimal, I have to say, but it is something. And shortly after lockdown, and I regret we didn't do it earlier, but we brought in a counsellor because that sounds all great and lovely, but actually they weren't getting off the island, and that gives them what they call cabin fever or island fever. And so we brought in a counsellor, and they needed it, and that stuff was coming out in those meetings. The detail of which, of course, I'm not privy to, but stuff was coming out that showed it was the right thing. And we've continued that. So we've, in terms of well-being and look after them, we've continued the counsellor coming every 6 weeks. Not everyone wants to see her, but a number do. And we've, just a bizarre thing, so Plymouth, to get to Plymouth and back, to have your hair done, is 60 quid in a taxi plus your haircut. So we've now got a hairdresser coming to the island every so often, so that people can book in for that. Well-being is obviously hugely important, and particularly difficult because of our location.
And whilst we're with you, Giles, there's a question here from Rocco Bova, which I'll expand into the well-being theme. But are hospitality businesses prepared to earn less profits in order to improve the working conditions and pay of staff, also improve their mental health and their well-being too?
Well, my position with business, which is juxtaposition, of course, to investors. So I own circa 80% of Burgh, and there are other investors who this chap I mentioned had previously brought in, so they hadn't all disappeared. It is juxtaposition, but if it's my experience in any business that you want a successful business, it has to be robust. And robust means that you have well-trained staff who you retain and look after and pay a commensurate rate. So I would say that I think our industry is underpaid in certain departments, and from my point of view, I am prepared to make less profit to create a more robust business. I think that the quid pro quo for doing that is you create a robust business with robust profits, although they might be less. Your yield goes down, and therefore your value goes up. So you might make less profit, but you might have more value in your hotel.
Eloise, can I just jump in on what Giles was saying there? Because I think it's incumbent for operators to share this challenge with owners, hotel owners, because it does answer part of your question. I think, you know, we're going through very tough times, as you can hear from our colleagues here. Owners need to share this as well. I've heard some probably very early days of hotel managers and operators in the city saying that they may have to close floors down in September, October because they don't have enough staff, or maybe close restaurants down because they can't find people. So this is very alarming, of course, and we're all trying to avoid such issues happening. But I think we need to share these challenges with owners of the business. So sacrificing profits, of course, is a very strong terminology to use, but to understand the enormity, the scale of the challenges ahead of us, and for their understanding of what we need to do to resolve it. I don't think throwing money at salaries all the way along the line is necessarily the answer. As I said before, I think it's about finding supply. We need to get more people coming to the industry, so people have to be prepared a fair salary, of course, and that's all very important. But I think our key task at the moment as operators is finding new people who've gone away from the industry and attracting them back again, or people who didn't even consider us coming back to us. So I think that's it's a challenge we've got to absorb and get on top of, but it's one we should share with the owners of our businesses too, so they understand what we're going through.
Sorry, I'd just like to come in on that point as well. I think that was a situation I came up against when we were opening Galvin at Windows. So where I come, I'm in the middle of the Hilton as the hotel where we're located, and then obviously Chris and Jeff Galvin is the Galvin brothers, and somewhere in the middle. And I do believe that we, as leaders and as operators, we have to really put an intelligent business case forward as well, because there's a lot of operators out there that are just going, as we say, for that, driving the revenue and getting that revenue piece. And what we're doing is we're pulling the string too tight on what the guest experience is and the pressure on the team as well. So I think right now it's crucial we do have them conversations. And I did it, I had to stand firm and say, we can't open Monday, Tuesday. We can't open Wednesday lunch, because if we could, and we could have made the revenue there, but from a common sense of business, then guests mightn't have returned, and then guests would have went away with a really bad experience. And I think we all, especially on this call today, we all have a massive responsibility to protect our industry and stand really firm to say, we just can't do it, with what we've got, and looking at them different options. So yeah, I think it's a very good point of operators having them conversations. It's critical right now.
Mm-hmm. I can see Giles and Joanne with their hands up, so I'll come to Giles first and then I'll move on to Joanne.
Yes, I think we just need to perhaps hold our breath a little bit longer. The figures are that in the end of May, 2.4 million people were still furloughed. It makes sense that those people were at the lower end, pay-wise, below £24,000 a year, and probably the people that we were employing during the heavy seasons or the high seasons. And that ends in the not too distant future, and one would expect that of those 2.4 million people, those who don't have two jobs, which is an odd one, wasn't it? We'll have a lot of people coming back, and that will fill a lot of our slots. And of course, actually, a lot of those people will be disappointed because those jobs may have been filled from people outside the industry. And the other thing, which may or may not change, I hope some sense is seen, is that 1.3 million people, independent newspapers figures, left the UK last year and went back to Europe. So we certainly experienced some of our guests, clients, staff, coming back, not coming back. So I'm expecting some of those will return once Europe and Britain have settled their differences.
Mm-hmm. Optimistic. We need optimism for sure. And Joanne, coming to you next, please.
I don't think it's a different challenge to the one we've always had. I think it's just maybe a little more in focus. I think our role as operators has and always will be to make a three-legged stool balance, and that's between looking after our guests, looking after our team, and looking after the profitability of the hotel. And I think that has never been, unless you're in a sale position, never been a short-term proposition. You've got to look at the long term. And so, yes, there may be pressure on profits in the short term, but I think it's about playing the long game. You can be a hero for 3 months and absolutely pay the price for that for years to come. So I think it's not just about pay. I think absolutely it's looking after the whole being, and it's about learning, it's about growth, it's about well-being, it's about being a great place to work. One of the things that we found phenomenal in this is we've always had a really good refer a friend scheme. We'll pay up to £1,000 to our team to refer a friend, and we have done for years. But since so many people were made redundant, our recruitment has come basically internally through refer a friend, because people want to work for a good company. And I think that's one of the things that we will help us to keep that three-legged stool in balance.
Mm-hmm. That's, I know we've had a question come in from Damon. Allen talks about anything outside of the box or extra incentives to provide employees better retention rates or to attract staff, and that refer a friend scheme is not one that I've come across so far in my job role. So to me, that does come across as something that's outside of the box. Joanne, is there any other programs or courses or ideas that you've put in place either at the Athenaeum or elsewhere that can help engage a team and provide that learning to either attract staff or keep staff within the industry?
Yes, Eloise, thanks for bringing this up. It's a subject that's really dear to my heart. I absolutely agree with Adrian. We need to attract new talent, but I also think we need to do a really good job of looking after the talent that we had in the industry. And I think I'm honoured to be a Master in holder along with a couple of the other esteemed panelists, and sort of the back end of last year, there were a few real scary statistics coming through. So prior to the pandemic, hospitality held 1 in 10 jobs in the whole economy. By November, 1/3 of all redundancies were coming from our sector. And if you were under 30, then the chances are that you were the one to be made redundant. 60% of the people being made redundant were under 30. And so we wanted to do something. After all, Master in holders are really about raising the standards of the industry and training and developing people. And so we set up something called MIDAS, Master in holders developing additional skills, which is an online, absolutely free series of masterclasses, podcasts, even videos, etc., on a range of subjects from finance and savvy selling and lean principles to how to deal with resilience, motivation, and performance. And we did that really to respond to the fact that we were hearing anecdotally that so many of our real talented young superstars, our leaders of the future, were leaving to go and work in retail, or a lot were going to work for the supermarkets, and we were losing them. And we wanted to do something to just give them a belief that there would be a future back in hospitality. If we couldn't employ them, which we couldn't, and as much as we wished we could, we couldn't. We wanted to help them continue to grow their skills, keep connected with hotels, and to keep, to be able to talk to others, to network with people that were in a similar position. And we've been absolutely astounded by the number of people that we've reached. It's actually been very rewarding and an absolute joy to see so many of our future young talent really get involved in MIDAS. So we've been running it for six months. If you want to find out more, you can go to masterinholders.co.uk/MIDAS. It does what it says on the tin, really. And all of the content is there, so you could go back and review if you haven't found it prior to today. So it's something we will continue to do. We're going to take a bit of a break in the summer because, quite frankly, I think everybody is really busy and doesn't have too much time just at the moment. But we hope to get it back up and running again in September, October. So, yeah, absolutely something that I think was important to keep our sector and our young people engaged in the sector.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Joanne. And thanks to all of you for your insights. Unfortunately, we don't have time to run through the last of the questions, but I do have a few outro slides before we close off. I myself will be taking a break during August from some webinars, but the Trailblazers series is going to return in September. And we have Cvent and Aperto on board as sponsors, so a huge thank you to them. And the Urban Living Festival, which is an event we initially wanted to hold in 2019, is now going ahead, full steam ahead at Tobacco Dock in London, October the 26th and 27th. And the idea for the event was actually brought about pre-COVID in response to how the different hospitality and real estate asset classes were converging.
Thank you.
And in the run-up to the event, we decided to launch a series of branded webinars, each of which cater to a different audience to offer a glimpse of what to expect at the Urban Living Festival. And we now have a video to give you an overview of all the webinars that we've held over the past year. Hello.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
Good afternoon.
Well, good afternoon.
Hello, everybody.
And welcome to the Trailblazer
Service Department News,
Rockstars,
Urban Living Light,
Engage,
Urban Living webinar series.
I think you have to tell the right story to the right people via the right people is really, really key in the right place.
Because we are all in the same, in the same boat. We want to make this work.
When you take away that personal contact, it's a problem.
Through the concept development, through the architecture, through the design, through the experience.
So although it's a growing sector, there's still huge scope for it to evolve even further.
We've been very busy indeed, and further information about the webinars and Urban Living Festival can be found through my colleague Katie, so please do get in touch. Her contact details are up on your screen now. So that is a wrap from us today. Thank you to our Trailblazers. All their LinkedIn profiles are in the chat, so I do encourage you to continue the conversation. Thanks to Cvent for sponsoring, and thank you to our audience for tuning in. Take care, everyone.